Hi there, I'm Kevin. Let's talk about a little something I like to call emotional masturbation. Yeah, it's as gross as it sounds. Being a gay Christian kind of makes you a unicorn. A lot of people have asked me, oh, do you want to come get coffee with me? Hey, do you want to grab lunch sometime? And I'm not saying that I don't love coffee and lunch. Like, I love all these things. And I also love people, and I also love friends and all that blah, 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 blah. But usually when it's with somebody I meet at church who hears about my story, they're curious. And for a lot of people, I might be the only gay Christian, or queer Christian for that matter, that they've ever met in their entire life. They are curious to see how I reconciled my faith, my sexuality, how I view the Bible, and all that sort of stuff that I talk about on this channel and on my blogs and on my podcast. I used to do this a whole lot. I used to have a whole bunch of one-on-ones with people because I honestly believe that telling stories and having relationships with people is how we bring about greater amounts of change in our world. But here's what I also found. While conversation is wonderful and lovely, I find it to be sometimes ineffective. Folks I'm meeting with are usually white, usually straight, usually cisgender, usually / sometimes pastors, or people who work within the ministry context. They already claim to love their gay friends. So they're not aggressively like anti-LGBT, but they're not exactly affirming either. But they're so curious to hear my story because, again, being a gay Christian, you kind of become an anomaly in some ways. So I'll sit down with them and I'll tell them my story, and I usually always cry because that's what happens when I tell the story of what God has done in my life. And honestly, most of the time I'm happy to do this, but what it also feels like simultaneously, like sometimes it feels like I'm the object of their emotional masturbation. Emotional masturbation is the term that I picked up from trans writer and comedian Patty Harrison. Basically, it's when a marginalized individual is made to tell their story over and over and over again to different groups, or it gets shared a whole lot and people are listening to it and they're sharing it also, like, oh my gosh, your story is so great. I'm so inspired by your faith. This is so wonderful. Wow, I cannot believe that you've gone through so much, and like, wow, you're such an inspiration to me. And yeah, gross, right? And that's happened to me. Like, they'll sit down and hear my story and they'll say, wow, it's just so inspiring that, you know, you're willing to do the work to build bridges for people. Your story is so important. You're such a good example of what it means to be Christ-like, and yada, yada, yada. And the person who has heard my story and consumed my story, the person asked me to relive the gritty details of my story, to bare my soul to them, and then at the end of it, nothing changes. And sure, maybe in the moment they're teary-eyed, maybe they're emotional, and they're grateful for the time that you spent with them, and all that they seem very, very kind, but then at the end of it, they're not changed at all. They don't become a better ally. They don't even correct their friend from making a problematic statement or joke. But that person who listened to my story, or your story if you're a marginalized individual, feels like they've done something good. I sat down and I listened to this queer Christian story, and even though I don't really know how I feel about this theologically, I'm a good person. I listened to them. I'm a good person. And that's the tape that plays over and says, I'm a good person. I'm a good person. I didn't do anything bad. I'm not actively oppressing him. But, you know, I'm a good person. And my beef with that is, like, you've spent time with me. You've asked me to bare my soul to you. You've listened to my entire life struggle, how it's still being a gay person in this world affects me today. And you, the proverbial you still do nothing. And just so you know, me retelling my story again and again and again is somewhat re-traumatizing. Are you aware of the emotional and spiritual tax it takes on us? It hurts to talk about the pain I've walked through over and over and over again. My hope is by telling you about my pain, about my struggle, that you are going to work to make our world, our community, our churches better, so that another queer person does not have to walk through the same crap that I've had to walk through. My motivation for being vulnerable with you is not that you just entertain a new way of thinking, but that you actually engage with a new way of living. One in which you're going to be standing with people like me and other marginalized people across the board. Listen, listening to the stories of marginalized folk doesn't make you woke, nor does reading God and the Gay Christian make you an ally any more than me reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me makes me a racial justice ally. And having transactional coffee dates where, again, you're just listening to somebody's story and saying how inspirational they are and maybe crying a little bit, that doesn't make you a friend. It doesn't even make you a good person, to be honest. There are ways to avoid and stop your emotional masturbation addiction, my friend. Really easy things that you can do to avoid emotionally masturbating to somebody else's trauma. First one, actually become friends with the person that you're listening to. It's very common for me to share my story with somebody and then they just ghost me. They don't follow up with a text, they don't email me, they don't ask more questions. They've heard my story and whoop, they're good, they're a good person, but there's no follow-up and there's no life change on their part. They want it quick, quick, easy, and they want to move on, kind of like masturbation. But if you're hearing somebody's story, that means you're entering into their life, and you should be curious to see how their life actually unfolds. If I'm going to share my life with you, I expect you to follow through and actually do life with me. The second thing you can do to avoid emotional masturbation, can I say emotional masturbation enough? I don't know, is ask questions. Ask questions about things you didn't understand. Ask about things that made you feel uncomfortable. Don't just sit there and be like, oh yeah, that was so great. No. Ask questions, please. We want you to ask questions. Third thing, and this is a big one, remember that the person you're listening to does not represent the entire community that they are a part of. Sure, if you talk to me as a gay Christian, so I've got a good idea of like good things that could be done, general practices, but again, my experience is gonna be very different from another queer person's experience, let alone another queer Christian. And one more idea, maybe we should just avoid having these transactional like one-on-one coffee dates where we spend 2 hours just crying into our lattes. Why not get yourself involved in a local organization or a local Bible study that is affirming of queer people, where people are sharing life? As you integrate yourselves into their life, their stories are naturally going to come out, so you don't have to have this one-off conversation. You're actually building community with people rather than just consuming and taking from their community. So enter into life with other queer people. Honestly, that will make your time learning about the queer community so much easier if you're not limiting yourself to just one person's story, one person's perspective. And hopefully in all this, we're both being changed by that friendship and that relationship growing. All that to say, stop it. Stop emotionally masturbating to my trauma. It's weird. It makes me upset. I'm not an object for you to consume. I'm not just some story you can pass along to your friends. Well, maybe if like you're watching this video, you can share it with your friends. In fact, I'd really love it if you would share this video with your friends. I'm a person, and if you want my story, you have to agree to do something with it. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked it, go ahead, like, share, and subscribe. Connect with me down on the blog and on the podcast and on all the social media, and leave a comment below. Have you ever been the object of someone's emotional masturbation? Or are you someone who does this? Are you an emotional masturbator? Are you a chronic emotional masturbator? Do you like me saying masturbator a whole lot? I'm gonna stop now. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.